I think it's fair to say we're reaching peak. Tim, Peake!
Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Chris.
This book is brilliant, mate.
Oh, thank you very much.
Seriously, it's so interesting. It's a family book. We get a few of these. They're once in a blue moon. But you just got to have this book in your house for your family. Space, the human story. Let's cut to the chase if you don't mind, Tim. Great to see you again.
Likewise, yeah.
As always. So bonfire night is approaching. We are taught never to return to a lit firework. NASA are taught the same when it comes to a lit rocket. Is that right?
Yeah, but I think that, you've got to have the sense of when to return to it and when not to return to it. And there's been some times over the years when, the crews have had to make a close call as to...
Give us a bit more flavour of that.
Well, I mean, when a rocket goes off, you need to not return to it. But then there was a crew sat on the rocket, and when they were going for the Gemini missions, and had it launched, had it not launched, these early mistakes, and sometimes that decision of whether you abort or you don't abort can meaning the difference between life and death.
Yeah. And how astronauts used to get the job compared to how you got the job. So we're talking. I know you've been listening this morning. Thanks for listening. 8,000 applicants applied for the same seats as you eventually got on your space trip. But obviously many didn't. Was it always like that? How has it changed? How did people used to get jobs as astronauts? How do they get jobs now?
Well, I think that was one of the inspirations for the book, because I used to love reading The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe, and it was all about those early days of the Mercury 7 and the Russian cosmonauts being selected and that space race. And right now, 4 of my friends are in training to go and sit on top of SLS on the Artemis 2 next year, going back to the moon. And I thought it would be great to just write this human story of that early phase to now, and how that selection process has changed and how some of it stayed the same. Yeah. I mean, the medical is alarmingly very similar today than it was all those years ago, with lots of prodding and poking. But the psychological aspects has changed a little bit, because it's a little bit of different psychology towards these long duration missions we're doing now.
You talk a lot about soft skills, which I think it's an unfortunate phrase, because it suggests they're not as important. So there are soft skills and there are more traditional skills. What are the soft skills? Why are they important? And what have you, from what you've learned about taking those into space, can we learn here on planet Earth?
Yeah, well, the soft skills are so important for long duration missions. I mean, in the Mercury era, really every mission was a test flight, and it was all about getting to space and getting back from space. But now on a 6-month mission, maybe a year-long mission to the space station, the getting there and back is a very tiny part of the mission. The rest of the time, you're working as a crew, you need to be able to get on with other people, and also to communicate well with ground and scientists. And you're not just working with test pilots. There are people, we've got engineers, we've got medical doctors, school teachers, people from different backgrounds who are astronauts today. So those soft skills are so important.
So you're taught, you're coached in how to get on with other people.
Absolutely, yeah.
What did they teach you? What have you learned? What have you brought back to the school run, for example?
Well, there's a lot of sort of conflict management and how to talk to people, how to address your concerns and recognise yourself. Actually, that's the first step, I think. When we go and live for 7 days down a cave, for example, and you're cold and you're wet and you're tired and you're hungry, and the first thing is, well, how do you feel? And when are you getting stressed? And how does your behaviour change when you get stressed? And how do you relate to other people? And then when you can rise above that and you can kind of put your own discomfort to one side, you can start helping other people.
And recognising it, I would imagine, is half the battle. Recognising your own situation and getting away from your chimp, if you like, your inner chimp.
Yeah.
Were you like that anyway? Is that one of the reasons you were chosen, because of your character?
I think partly, yes, and also low risk. The space agencies want people who can cope in those situations, who have done that kind of thing before. They've built up certain levels of resilience. So you've got to be able to go for these interviews and show that you've done something in your life where you've pushed yourself out your comfort zone.
And you're now in charge of the interviews, aren't you?
I was last year. I was part of that selection board as we were recruiting new European Space Agency astronauts. So it was quite fun being on the other side of the table.
And could you tell straight off the bat, was it quite immediate how somebody was or wasn't?
No, that's what I like. We had an hour with each candidate when we're interviewing them, and sometimes you read all the reports beforehand, and so you get paints a picture of what they're like. But it was interesting to see how some characters really kind of blossomed and shone during the interview and came to life, and others who you might have thought were going to be really strong candidates just weren't able to kind of sell themselves.
I didn't know about I do now, because before the interview, prepping for it, I didn't know really about the going down to the caves. I didn't really know about the being submerged in water for how many hours?
Well, we spent 12 days living underwater.
12 days underwater. And this is all to see if you can cope with being in a confined space and, having, not panicking about something that you didn't need to, but you could if you thought yourself into it too much.
Yes, yeah. And we were simulating an asteroid mission for that 12 days, and we were diving twice a day from our underwater habitat down to the ocean floor. And it was hugely exciting from a technical point of view and kind of running this simulated mission. But also it was about that living together with people in difficult circumstances.
It's all so amazing, isn't it? It's, you used the term cosmonaut there. You talk about the origination of the word astronaut. That's how you start the book off.
Yeah, that's right. And at one point, NASA was seriously considering cosmonaut. It sounded like a better word.
It's cool. Cosmonaut is cool.
Sailors through space. I mean, astronaut sounded a little bit too grand.
Yeah.
There was some disagreement with NASA. We're not really sailing to another star. That's 4.5 light years away.
Yeah.
But it was decided, NASA went with astronaut and Russia went with cosmonaut.
It's funny, isn't it? Because as a kid, I just thought cosmonaut because it was communist. I just thought it sounded a bit similar. And I thought, obviously, cosmos is, order and it is the universe, isn't it? That's the difference there. Yeah. You talked about test flights, you talked about Gemini. You're fascinated with the Bickering aspect of this one. Is that because of you and I? Is it because of our relationship?
Maybe that is, yeah. Maybe it's like the sort of trauma.
So Bantz is all right. Bickering's not great. What happens when Bantz turns into Bickering where?
Well, so this was Apollo 13, wasn't it? And they weren't happy with it. One of them got ill, and then they were just complaining about everything.
Well, Apollo 13, one of them got ill, but that was the kind of remarkable mission where they came back from all of those failures. But Apollo 7, there was Bickering, and Skylab 3, where there was, it was reported as a space mutiny. They all started to grow beards and went on strike for a day. It wasn't actually as bad as that. There was some misreporting going on. But there was huge amount of friction between crew and mission control. And it was just strange how some crews seemed to gel and work really well, and some crews struggled a bit more, especially coming from the same selection process.
So one bloke said to the other bloke, I've just been sick. And the other bloke said, just get rid of it, just don't tell anyone. But unfortunately their mics were on, so everybody heard. So everyone at NASA. So that was the first Houston sort of telling off. Houston to whatever telling off, and then it just sort of got worse from there. They said, well, how come you get weekends off? Why don't we get weekends off? Well, you're in space. Yeah, but still.
Yes, and they were coming on the back of a crew that had been particularly good. And you just get some crews that put in huge performance. I remember when Peggy Whitson was commanding the space station, Expedition 50, and they were knocking out the science on a weekly basis, and we were thinking, how are we going to compete with this? They're doing 120 hours of experiments every week, and that was the same for Skylab 2. They were knocking it out the park, and so Skylab 3 came along and were expected to be at the same level, and they just couldn't keep up with that.
Oh my goodness, it's like one Liverpool team from one season to the next. But it's very similar, isn't it? When you talked about gelling, about teams gelling, about people gelling, about chemistry, because we often say in show business, so we're going to cast a show, whether it's on stage on the West End, or it's on TV or on the radio. Oh, these two have got really good chemistry. Well, you can drop the word good, because it's just about whether they've got chemistry or not.
Yeah.
Because chemistry is usually good anyway, isn't it? I suppose. Yeah. Can you pre-orchestrate that? Have you learned to do that at NASA?
With a crew composition, yes, they do. They consider who's going up and the kind of skill sets and who's going to gel and get on. And but we do, we have to just get along with whoever we're up there with. They can't try and do that every time. You've got 7 people on board the space station from different nations around the world, so there will sometimes be personality clashes, but nothing too dramatic.
I mean, obviously you train for 6 years. Most, not most, but a lot of astronauts, cosmonauts train for 4 years. It can take people different times. How much time do you have? Are you on the list, which you found you weren't on the list? Tell us about the photocopier moment from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, so when we were selected, there were 6 of us. There were only 5 missions. We knew there were 2 Italian missions right up front, and Germany paid the most money into the program. So that we knew that there was Andy, Tom, and myself were the 3 who were the later ones to fly, and only 2 missions. And the UK at the time didn't pay any money into the human spaceflight program. We were part of ESA, but not human spaceflight. So I knew I was going to get get this reserve astronaut status. But I went to the photocopier one morning, and somebody had very carelessly left a letter there that really detailed exactly my role, and my likelihood and the chances of me flying to space were extremely slim. So Tim Peake is going to be the reserve astronaut.
Yeah. Peake by name, not by nature.
The ballad of the unflown astronaut.
Yeah,
as
it's the
kind of
unflown astronaut, isn't it?
Refer to it in the book.
Yeah, it's amazing. The unflown astronaut. You don't want to be on the unflown list, but to be on the list at all, I suppose, is. But then the expectations are there and the intentions there. But you were on the bench. You were on the bench in the squad.
That's right. But then things change, and that got turned around, and we generated more missions, and I ended up flying ahead of my French and Danish colleagues.
Yeah,
yeah.
Blimey. And is it true that a couple of mates actually nudged you towards applying for the job in the first place?
It was, yeah. In fact, my wife and an Army Air Corps mate of mine saw the advert before I did and just said, "Hey, Tim, you've got to go for this."
So it wasn't really on your radar, was it?
No. I strangely, I was working actually kind of with the space industry a little bit, because I was test pilot for the Apache helicopter, and some of the technologies we were using were coming from the space industry. But I hadn't actually seen that selection process until my mate nudged me, and I thought, yeah, I've got to go for it.
What did you learn from other people? It's in the book, but just for people because they've not bought the book yet. What did you learn from? Give us some names and what you learned from their experiences, or what you thought you might benefit from their experiences once you were in space yourself.
A hero of mine who I wish I'd met, I never did, was Peake Conrad. Such a colourful person, very professional astronaut, but somebody who was able to be at the top of their game and also have a wicked sense of humour. And everybody who worked with him just said he was absolute delight. And one of those things that just greased the wheels. It made the missions run more smoothly. It just made life more fun. And I thought, if I can do that, if I can try and be as professional as possible, but also come to things with a bit of a sense of humour.
Wear it lightly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Wear it lightly, take it really serious. Don't take yourself serious in the middle of it unless you absolutely have to. But when is that ever, I suppose? Tell us about the Yuri Gagarin Memorial Wii.
Yeah. Well, the Russians are very superstitious, and Yuri was there 12th of April 1961. He's on his way to the launch pad, and quite naturally, it's a nerve-wracking moment. You're going to be the first human launched into space, and decided to have a wee stop halfway to the launch pad, and jumped off the bus and weed on the back right tyre. And because that was part of the launch day, it subsequently became the part of the launch day for every astronaut who's ever flown from Baikonur. So we still to this day pee on the back right tyre of the bus on the way to the launch pad.
And that is whether you want to go or not. But yeah. I suppose everyone wants to go in the end, don't they?
Yeah, well, the female astronauts, they could take a container, a pre-prepared container, if they want to throw that on the wheel
NASA
too.
Shiwi, NASA branded. You can buy them online, everyone.
It's a free-for-all. Anyone can do it.
Oh, wow. It's so cool. I didn't realise about the calorie intake, and because there's barely anything of you anyway. We'll get into that in a moment or two. I mean, you're fit as a fiddle. It's not that you shrinking, wilting, willowy nothing. You are you're as hard as granite. When you post a photograph with Tim, you think, what is that, a human or is that something else? But there's not much of you. There's nothing spare, that's for sure.
I'm cheap, 70 kilograms. Yeah,
70 kilograms.
Cheap payload to get to space.
You are now, but you went down to 64, 65, didn't you?
I did, yeah. First 5 weeks in space, lost a lot of weight, and I thought I was eating properly, but you feel full up very quickly. You eat a meal, and without gravity, it just sits there at the top of your stomach, and so you don't feel like eating a huge amount more. And when I had my first nutritional assessment, they said, you're just not taking on enough calories, so you kind of have to force yourself to eat the right quantity of food.
And so you had to eat more than you were already uncomfortable eating, and some.
Yes, yeah, and snacking, I found that's what I did, because I didn't like eating big meals, so I would just snack a lot throughout the day.
But we know that if you snack on nutritionless stuff like chocolate, I mean, you're getting the sugar, but it's all useless, and you don't feel full because of it. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Bacon sandwiches in the space, right? You used to treat yourself to a bacon sarnie, is that right? How many did you take with you?
I had a few. About 10% of our food is bonus food, as they call it, and you can have some fun with your bonus food. Naughty drawer, yeah, stuff off the shelf. And in Europe, the space agency, they like to have a bit of cultural flavour to your food. So if you're Italian, you get an Italian chef to cook the dishes, French chefs for the French astronauts. So I had Heston Blumenthal, who cooked some dishes for me. We had it as part of a kids competition, and one of those was a bacon sandwich. I had a good old sausage sizzle there as well. And
how was it in space, the bacon sarnie?
It looked disgusting, I have to say, but it tasted delicious.
Did it honestly?
And the smell, and that's the biggest thing, because that warm bacon smell.
So you literally get the calf, the greasy spoon calf smell in the International Space Station.
Yeah.
And how did the other astronauts feel about that? Were they down with it or not?
No, they were completely in envy.
Were they?
And that was the first meal I had, actually. I got on board, and Scott Kelly, my commander, he'd been up there for 8 months by that time, and he'd fished out this bacon sarnie tin, and he heated it up. So I just arrived on the space station. I'd had a lovely meal only sort of 10 hours, 12 hours ago, and he opened up this can, and he just started salivating. And I said, Scott, you need this more than I do.
Oh my gosh.
So I shared my first bacon sarnie with the crew.
And because there's no gravity in the space and on the space station, the spacewalks and all this kind of stuff, which is all fascinating. It's all in the book. Not only Tim's experience, but lots of other astronaut and cosmonauts' experience. You have to replace gravity with the fans, don't you?
Yes.
So how do the fans make up for gravity in certain situations?
In terms of the airflow, yes. So if you didn't have that, you would have a pocket of carbon dioxide would just build up around your head with all the CO2
so you could actually
out.
suffocate.
You could suffocate
even though
that.
the rest of the space station would be fine.
Yeah,
it just stays where it. That's so bizarre, isn't it?
It is. There's no convection, so there's no hot air is not rising, cold air is not sinking. So you need those fans to keep stirring the air,
right,
and also keeping it clean and smelling fresh as well. And that's what really scrubs all the carbon dioxide. We get fresh oxygen pumped in, and it keeps everything running smoothly.
I know you've been listening to the show. We've been talking about your night shift. So a full night shift on the space station is 45 minutes because
we go around the planet once every 90 minutes. So it's half it's dark, half of it's light.
That is amazing. And you were early for your spacewalk. So you arrived at the solar panel 10 minutes early.
Yes, yeah.
So it's not like a London commute then, is it? You can never go anywhere early.
We were, Tim Coper and myself, we were a bit nervous about getting out there on time because we had a really tricky job to do. It had to be done in darkness. Yeah. So we've only got, 35, 40 minutes by the time we get ourselves set up there to do it. And it was live electricity. So, you can't get it wrong. You've got to do it in darkness.
That's because the sun is literally hitting the solar
panels. Because the sun is
panel.
hitting these solar panels, and we are operating with high voltage. So the dark side of the Earth, that was our chance to get this thing fixed. So we got out there in good time before the sun went down, and NASA Houston just said, you're early, hang out for 10 minutes.
So what did you do?
So we clipped
You
on.
took up photography, didn't you?
Pushed off and floated there in the darkness of space with a camera and started taking photos.
Wow.
Can I ask you about the photo on the front cover of the
Yeah.
book? So what, who, how?
Yes, Bruce McCandless, so 1984, out the back of the Challenger shuttle. An amazing flight. When you see that photograph, it looks like it's photoshopped. It's this, a human, you can't really make out the face, just floating in the blackness of space above planet Earth. Such an iconic shot. And that was the first untethered spacewalk. So, to go outside on a spacewalk anyway is taking a large risk. And you feel a bit remote and isolated. But to go floating off...
You feel a bit remote and isolated. What?
I feel like that when I go to Sheen.
But Bruce there, I from a test pilot perspective, he is just, that takes so much courage to do what he did.
That is the test flight of all test flights.
That is the test flight of all test flights.
There's nothing comes close to that.
Yeah, unbelievable.
It is the best. Probably, well, there's a couple of other images that I could conjure up, nothing to do with space, that I think, you'd have those on your wall. We should all have this picture on our wall. Oh, my goodness me. So 628 people have been there and done it. More on the way. Hopefully as safe as possible. But there is PTSD. And you said you struggled a lot more once you'd come back to Earth than you did at all beforehand or whilst in space. Not specifically, particularly domestically with your wife and your closer circle, but generally with the world. Just talk about that if you do. And what you learned from other people in the book with similar experiences.
Yes, I think, we're so busy when we first get back. And after that 6 months of post-flight, all the science is done, the debriefs are done. Physically, actually, we're back in shape again. We go through rehabilitation and build our muscles back up. But I remember that first Christmas after landing, and that's when I kind of just crashed a bit. And I got sick, and you then have time to process or try and process what you've done, and also then looking to the future. I think, okay, well, how do you try and do something now, having experienced that, and how do you kind of go on and find new challenges and new goals? And there's definitely a period there where you have to, search yourself and refocus on objectives. And this is something that you see in astronauts throughout the ages. I mean, many of the Apollo crews suffered from this as well, and found it very hard, and also found it very hard being asked all the time, what was it like? And how do you explain to somebody all those years of training, launching on a Saturn V, flying to the moon, landing, walking around, driving a rover, coming back home, and somebody says, so what was it like? And Pete Conrad, he came up with the phrase, super, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because that was his way, his humorous way of just trying to cope, trying to just say, well, I can't put it into words, I can't describe it, so let's have some fun with it.
Yeah, and also it is, systematically, incrementally heavy being if your present seems to be always about your past. Because they're always, in the present, in your life now, people are always asking about something that's already happened. It's like being in the Beatles, I would imagine. But not dissimilar. It's like, we always say, how can Paul McCartney, why wouldn't he want to talk about being in the Beatles? Well, because he was in the Beatles, because you've been in space. Yeah. And it's great being in the Beatles, and it's great being in space, but I have to live the rest of my life now.
Yes, yeah. And I think for me, still being part of the program, doing the education outreach, helping the UK Space Agency, looking at UK launches we've got coming up next year, spacecraft design, spacesuit design, all that kind of thing. That's what really helps me. I feel like I'm still contributing to the space program in that way. And who knows, maybe there'll be a chance of another mission coming up.
Never say never. Never say never. Never say never. It's funny because there's a couple of people here, along with myself, we've been through life-threatening situations recently, and we all had a moment a couple of weeks ago after the show, the three of us, we got together, and we all had a little chat, a little download about the fact that we had trouble feeling grateful. Not that we were ungrateful, but we just didn't feel grateful enough for the second chance we'd been given. And we weren't, because something had happened where we'd paused how we really felt about the situation when we were going through it, And the thing is, if you don't think about it, you're all right. And then if you dive into it and go all the way into it, you're probably going to be all right. It's if you get caught in the middle.
Yes, yeah. And I think, turning to people and talking to people and having that support network is what really helps there. You've just got to, be open and honest. And I think we have a really good support network in the space industry. We're all friends, and we have psychological support and all the rest of it. So you can talk to people and you can share these experiences. But it wasn't always the case. Coming back to the Mercury astronauts, that was a very macho alpha male environment. It was only men selected, fast jet test pilots, and they didn't really talk about their problems or what they'd been through and their shared experiences.
Yeah. And then you feel guilty because surely you should be grateful for the rest of your life because you got to do that, or you got to get well, and you go, but I don't feel like that, but I know I should. And then there's the conflict, and there's the post-traumatic stress syndrome, isn't it? Because while you're having the trauma or you're having the experience, it's not stressful. It's the P that counts. It's the post, isn't it? Yeah. It's the P word.
Absolutely, and it affects so many people differently as well. Some people can shrug it off, other people will really struggle. And I think it is that case of you don't know when it's going to actually manifest itself or how it might manifest itself.
Yeah, and it creeps up on you sometimes. I love the title of the chapters. They're great. It's all about getting, isn't it? So, getting the job, getting ready, getting to Moscow, getting a mission. Oh, sorry, I've not got my glasses on. Getting to Moscow, getting a mission, getting off the ground, getting the job done, getting out.
Yes,
awesome.
Yeah.
Out of all the people that you've met who've done this, that you've done, don't pick a favourite because I love all my children. I'm sure you love all your fellow astronauts and cosmonauts. Who's the most interesting? Is it Pete? Is it the enigma that was Neil Armstrong? Is it Helen, your fellow astronaut here in the UK, or who?
So many different astronauts for so many different reasons. I mean, Peake, yes, because colourful, humour, and I think he was just a fantastic character. Charlie Duke, I've had the pleasure of meeting several times, and just a wonderful character. Again, lovely man. Yes, I mean, Peggy Whitson, incredible work ethic. What an inspirational woman. I wish I had her kind of drive and ability to just take on work. So many different people. Neil Armstrong, from a test pilot perspective as well, what he did, his flying skills. I mean, on Gemini 8, when they docked with the Agena, and then as they undocked, the spacecraft went into this uncontrollable rotation. I don't think there are many astronauts or test pilots who could have saved that capsule and saved that mission. He's quite extraordinary in his flying capabilities. He was a hell of a focused
human being, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Tim, great to see you. Anything you'd like to say to the audience before you go?
I've had so much fun writing this book. It's just a warm story about humans, about what we've done, how we've done it, ordinary people doing extraordinary jobs.
And you found this more comfortable than writing about yourself, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I had more fun with it because it's not personal, and so I've obviously interjected my own story where I can add to it.
A load of you comes across, and I'm so glad because we get the real Tim Peake. Yeah. It's so cool, man. Your take on things. Vas, anything else?
Just the fact that there's going to be some people sort of this time next year, you were saying, back on the moon.
Well, heading around the moon, and then the year after that will be on the surface of the moon. So Artemis 2 is going to be a bit like Apollo 8, orbiting the moon, and then Artemis 3, boots back on the moon again.
I have one quick question. How do you get weighed when you're in space? Like, how do they weigh you?
Brilliant question.
Yeah. Well done. Best question. Well done.
We kind of called it riding the donkey. There's this device.
Should I have asked?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit weird. There's this device. We'd be on the watershed here.
No.
You kind of have to wrap yourself around it. It's like a metal pole with a spring, and you wrap your body around this metal pole, press a button that releases the spring, and then we bounce up and down on top of this thing, and it goes to Hooke's law and the oscillations of a spring and a mass.
I'm surprised you get any work done up there with all this fun. Weighing yourself, that's what they call it.
Yeah, so depending on how many oscillations we make in a certain amount of time, you can work out what the mass is at the end of this stick. So it's just physics.
Very quickly, I have trouble sleeping, always have done. I know you had trouble sleeping when you first went to space. Any tips?
Well, for me, it was don't look out, don't get that influx of light. I did that once, big ultraviolet light, taking photos of the Bahamas just before going to bed. Didn't sleep all night.
They changed that, haven't they? Because they have the red and blue light.
Yeah, so we shift the light. We go red shifted towards night, and it really helps that circadian rhythm getting into the
Tim, you're the best, man.
Great talking to Chris. Thank you very much.
Great to see you. Tim Peake, what a book. Seriously, what a book. Tim Peake, Space, the Human Story. Round of applause. Yes, Tim Peake.
Thank you very
Control
much.
room round of applause. Thank you very much. This doesn't happen very often. Here we go. Yeah!